Hey everyone, and in today's video, as you might have guessed from the box, I'm going to be reviewing the ER20 from Eryone 3D printers. Alright, so the box showed up a couple days ago, and I've now had a chance to look at it. The box, look at the lovely box. But we're just going to give it a cut open here. And ta-da! So the first thing we have here is the user manual, and we have a little bit of test filament that has come with the printer. So that's going to be useful for when we do the print once it's all set up. This is the part where I hope I didn't unbox it upside down. And there we go. So here we have the printer with the print bed, the gantry, apparently the electrical cord is right here, so we can remove that. And we have over here is the packing list with all the accoutrements that you could possibly ever want. Some extra gifts and spare screws, which is useful if you run into issues. A fully laid out toolkit for everything that you could potentially need. The spool holder, of course, and the install screws, USB cable, apparently a knob, a micro SD card reader, and if you look carefully enough here, the actual micro SD card. It's important to keep an eye on this guy because he's small and black. You definitely do not want to misplace him, although most of the stuff I found you can get online if you need it. They've come with a spatula, and this is a newer design over what I had in the Thinker SE, so this is a nice addition. Very nice. So before I pull this out, I should probably read through the manual. Now, the manual has, quick assembly guide, instructions on how to put it together. It's actually very straightforward. There's also some controls, safety features, packaging, layout. Main thing I want to make sure here, what else? Is there a bunch of other fun stuff, that if you've bought a 3D printer using Marlin, or if you have used an Eryone printer before or BLTouch, most of the stuff you're going to have a pretty good understanding. A lot of this information is actually for your slicer for later. When you start designing your own prints, and this is to make sure that you set up the slicer to print properly on this printer, as this printer uses a BLTouch or a BLTouch clone for leveling the bed, etc. The G code that your slicer is going to need is going to be very specific because you need to make sure that the bed leveling is done, because I don't believe this has end stops otherwise. And there's some printer maintenance stuff and how to contact them. So overall, pretty straightforward. But I think I can pull this apart and do it without really referring to this unless I need to. As I've been told, this is actually very straightforward. Very straightforward to put together. So first step is you need to remove the gantry, which comes with the Hotend attached to it. There we go. That back down there, and you'll note that the Hotend here actually has a BLTouch on the side. It has the cooling fan for the Hotend, and then the front fan is for cooling the actual filament as it comes out, which you can see here in this photo of the internals of the Hotend, which includes the cooling fan, the actual Hotend, which is in a silicone sock, and the wiring to all the required pieces. So that's all one piece, which is great. So I'm just going to move that over here and put that down. And now I'm going to take the rest of the printer out of the box. I think it's just going to come out as one single unit. Apparently the Z bars are here, so that's, I guess, good. So let's see if we can get this all out without any incident. It is definitely packed in here really, really well. Found a little screw though, so I'll have to figure out where that guy goes. Oops. Yes, this is on a rolly table, probably not the best. And that appears to be everything in the box. So I'm going to make this box disappear. And now here we have the printer itself. There's the base, there's the trolley. I think there's some stuff here. So everything here looks pretty good. One thing I'm going to do before I actually put everything together is I'm going to basically take it and are there any other surprise pieces going to come out of this thing? Nope. Okay, cool. So I just wanted to quickly jump in here and show these two photos. The threaded Z bars are not actually installed in the factory. It's one of the things you have to do before you install the gantry with the ER20, and it is held by this coupler. And the Z coupler is held together by two tiny screws. And as you can see from the photos, on the left it's still installed, on the right it is not. And this is because the screws are not held firm to avoid unnecessary wear and binding as the gantry moves up and down. This is by design how this i3 system works. But during shipping they had come loose. So before I actually start putting everything together, one thing I did read on the internet was that the board cables can come loose in shipping. So I'm just going to take the bottom off very quickly and check to make sure that my cables are tight. Okay, so we're just going to open this up carefully and just check these cables here look good. That looks good. This looks good. Everything looks good. Yep, it all looks nice and tight in there. So that is excellent. So it looks like the first step we need to do is actually install these screws into the Z axis. So they were wrapped in plastic, which I unwrapped. And basically we have to thread them through the bottom, and as this piece here is actually threaded, we're going to basically have to thread the screw all the way until it gets to the top here. Once we get to the top, over here. Okay, there we go. Hopefully that will stay there. And then we'll do the other one, which is just over here. Put this down. Yeah, far easier to do it when it's lying on the table. All right, so now we're going to put it onto the base, and then we attach the base. Okay. Oh. Okay, so now that we have the gantry attached, the screws are in, and the thing is relatively here, we're going to attach the hot end onto the front, and that is done using some screws. Looks like it's 2 screws. I'm going to guess it's to these screws by process of elimination. Yeah. All right. And this is relatively simple. It's attached from the front. Not these two screws, it's the two smaller screws. So it's the two small screws, which means I need the smaller here. Awesome. Make sure everything's tucked in nicely. Drop the first screw you attempt to do. Get the second screw ready. There we go. All right. Go. All right. Make sure it's tight. Go. Get around this little. There we go. And now the hot end's attached. So we have a few more screws, but I'm going to oh, I know what those are for. All right. So this is the glass bed. It's covered for protection. Underneath, there's a hot zone. This is actually in its own little, is it a bag or is it just, I don't know. Let's see if we can get it off. No, I think this is literally glued in, yeah. Okay, there we go. And there's the bed. So we're gonna put it on here carefully. Logo to the front. Go. There are these little clips if you're ever wondering what they are. Take a photo of one. So a fun fact while I'm here quickly running through adding each of these clips to the bed, and you're adding them to the Z axis because that's the axis that the bed is moving back and forth on. So you want to make sure that the glass bed sits on the heating plate without shifting. That I actually installed the glass bed upside down. Now, this is actually not the end of the world. You can actually print on both sides of the glass bed if you want to. So one critical step with any 3D printer that you get is to go through a final check and ensure that all the screws are as tight as they are required to be, that the belts twang if you give them a pluck, and that nothing seems to be out of place or missing, as this is critical to get a good quality print out of the printer the first time. So finally, we're just going to attach the spool holder here. Dropping screws. And we're back. So. Another quick note I wanted to show here is that you do need to tighten the couplers with the Z bar to the base. Otherwise, if you do try to print, bad things are going to happen real quickly. Okay, so everything is pretty much connected. We do have some connectors here that we have to plug in. And I think this should be pretty straightforward. X, extruder, the Y. Alright, X, Y. There we go. So at this point, everything should be connected other than the power. I have some filament here that I'm going to open up like so. Comes with a little gel pack. Oh, I guess I should put the knob back on the front, or put the knob on the front. And the SD card, because we'll need those two items. Go. So there's the knob, and the SD card goes in here on the side. There's also a spot for a USB drive, or USB connection if you so desire. Go, and I just need to get the scissors again. All right. Cool. I will mention one thing I don't like about these little spool samples they send. While they're great and they're nice and all that stuff, they can be a major pain when you're trying to print in terms of getting them to unspool correctly and all that stuff. I would have liked it if there was like a little mini spool or something that sort of held it in position. That might be just me. Everyone else might be okay with it. Okay, that's fed in, so it's almost at the hot end. You can also feed it using the extruder controls, but I generally like just doing that, and then I know it's mostly there. Then when I actually put a little bit of extrusion in, I expect it to come out instead of waiting for it to come out in hopes that it's not going to have any issues. Okay, so I got to plug this guy in and turn it on and see what we end up with. Okay, so it's gotten a little dark here because I took a break for dinner. But let's turn this on and see what we end up getting. Now I have gone and balanced out the Z-axis to make sure both sides are set. They're currently both set so they're level to the 14 mark on the vertical bar. So this is actually quite useful to make sure, because while you don't have to level the bed, you do need to make sure the bed is level to the Z gantry. So in the controls, it says to use a piece of paper, and then we're going to go to, let's move action, motion here, auto home. And with any luck, this will okay, so now it's auto homed. we're now going to go to calibrate the Z axis. So, similar to bed leveling, the purpose of this is to lower the hot end to a point where it is almost touching the bed. And the paper is used to give it a slight offset. And the idea being is that the hot end is so close that it is touching the paper and causing some resistance on the paper, but not so much that it stops the paper from moving. And as you can see here, it's running off of 0.1 millimeter adjustments. All right, so now that we've done the Z calibration, I don't need this piece of paper anymore. It should theoretically print perfectly fine. Right now I'm just making sure I can now load some filament into the printer. And the filament is loading into the printer right now. So this is a really good time to sort of basically sit there and say that so far I haven't had any major problems with running it. It is a little bit different than the Marlin system I've used, but it's not hard to get through. And the instructions are in the book here on how to use this system. So that's good. And we're just waiting for the filament to reach the end. Now, we may have to hit purge more a couple of times, depending on how far we put the filament in. I did push it most of the way already. If you haven't, you're going to be waiting a while. And you simply do that by squeezing this and then pushing the filament through. But I didn't want to push it right into the hot end. There we go. Now it's starting to come out. So it's starting to come out black because the filament is white, but clearly they used some black filament to test it. So I want to do a little bit more purge to see if I can get most of that black filament out. And I'm going to use a little tool to sort of pull it out once I think it's done so it doesn't stick to the actual hot end here. There we go. Okay, so with that done, we're going to hit continue. Just going to move the bed back. We're just going to remove our hot end material. And now we're going to find the print from media. And there's 3 codes. I don't know which one's which, but we're going to try test code 1 and see how that works out. Okay, so it took about 3 minutes for the bed to heat up, followed by the extruder, which gave me a little bit of time here to set up the camera a little bit differently so that it shows this print a little bit better. And as you can see here, it went without any problem, and then it moved on to the start of the print. So unsurprisingly, the first G-code was a 20 by 20 by 20 millimeter XYZ cube. This is pretty common for most printers to have this G-code in there, and basically it prints a small cube in the middle of the print bed. As you can sort of see here in this time lapse, it didn't seem to have any major issue, ran perfectly well, and the cube came out actually looking surprisingly good. So as you can see here, the cube actually turned out pretty well with solid XYZ axis measurements using my calipers. Given that the calipers have a plus or minus 0.2 millimeter error, I was very happy with these results. Next, I printed the second test object, which was a tiny little squirrel. And then I printed the third object, which was a vase. Now, the vase printed in vase mode, but you'll notice at the top that it sort of started to string out. And this was because I actually ran out of test filament just near the end of the print. So just a thing to keep in mind that while there is test filament provided, it's good for about 3 prints and not much more than that. So I then decided to use some Eryone Ultra Silk copper filament that I had, and I printed this benchy, and this looks like a really good benchy. It had a little bit of stringing, but nothing I would complain about. I then went on to print some Star Wars themed objects for a friend, and they actually turned out pretty well. Now, I should just mention that the Yoda has some tree supports from Cura and is actually size-wise much smaller than the Mandalorian image, as you can sort of see here when I compare all three together. So I hope this gives you a decent idea of how this printer performs out of the box. Basically, auto bed leveling really helps get a really good first layer, and I really didn't have any issues running this printer for these initial prints. I'm going to continue to use the printer, and I will probably put a more review-based video up at a later date, but until then, I have a bunch of other projects I need to get printed. So I hope you will consider joining me on this adventure with 3D printing, and consider subscribing to the channel, and at the very least, if you made it this far, please consider giving the video a like, as that will tell YouTube that it was a good video for everyone to see.